And today is just a reminder of another aspect of that healing process, and it's healing our own thinking and our own minds. I have a quotation from John. All that the Father hath is mine. Could have made that a little larger. All that the Father hath is mine. 16th chapter, 15th verse. These are words Jesus used. And what did he mean? Just all the stuff? Where does God keep the stuff? The automobiles, the houses on private islands and things, where does he keep it? What God is shown in every atom in this universe. There is intelligence in every atom in the universe. So the Father to whom Jesus referred, who wants Jesus or any of us to have it all, must have been an intelligent being, to have instilled intelligence throughout creation. And if intelligent and intelligence, then God must be mind. And that's why in New Thought and Unity and various metaphysical interpretations of Bible text, you see mind sometimes with a capital M, which stands for God. God mind, divine mind, the one mind. One of my early ministers in Unity, Frank Hansen. I dearly love Frank. He was a delight. He had a couple of habits that were kind of interesting when he spoke. I know I have some too, so you'll point these out someday. He tended to kind of lick his lips like a frog. But then he would make a point, and he'd use the wrong finger. Do you understand what I'm saying? Is that for me? Is that a private message? Frank was a good teacher. Some of you may remember Susan Downs, who was a co-minister down on the plaza. Susan Downs was from Louisville, and before I had Frank, she had Frank in Louisville. And we both had a great background in metaphysics from Frank Hansen. And Frank, in classes, I would hear him. Of course, then I was young and kind of still wet behind the ears in Unity. I was 70, 71. I got into Unity about 66. He would say in classes, well, you know, this is a mental world. And it took me a while to think about what he meant, but you realize, you remember the law of mind action. Thoughts held in mind produce after their kind, right? You know that law backwards and forwards. You understand you're using it all the time. We don't pay attention to what goes through our minds or what we hold in our minds, and remember we're always surrounded by thought. Thought is energy, much like radio waves. And each one of us is a broadcasting set. We're sending out stuff to other people, and we're getting stuff from what Charles Fillmore called race consciousness, which is the envelope of thought energy that surrounds the planet that comes from all the people. So sometimes things just fly through your mind and you think, oh, that's an unusual thought, and then you accept it as your own when you have the choice to dismiss it, release it, let it go. Well, life, this is a mental world, he said. And that is a reminder that life, our lives, it's a mental phenomenon. It's built out of thought. And your life, my life, is the sum of all the mental reactions we've had to and about things outside and inside ourselves. We're constantly building a consciousness of something. And then we experience that, and we've forgotten the things we've said to ourselves, the self-talk we've had about ourselves, the way we casually communicate with other people and things. Oh yeah, ain't it awful? Or, oh, that's too bad. And then we wonder why stuff happens. So, it is a mental world. And if God is intelligent mind, and we are an expression of that intelligence, wouldn't it be natural for God to seek to protect its own expression? I think so. Built into us, built into every creature. If you begin to fall, it's automatic to reach out and seek to stop yourself. Sometimes things go wrong in the body, and sometimes a person won't do that, and it's a very definite sign of something out of order. It's a natural thing, preservation. And God has given us some wonderful protections. Wouldn't God seek to protect its own expression? Well, when I talked about thoughts coming at you and this, what Charles Fillmore called race consciousness, he called it a sensitive plate that surrounds the world. That sensitive plate means like a piece of film that's gathering all the thought. Piece of magnetic tape. It's a record of thought, and we tune into it. God has given us protection. We do not have to take in everything that comes to us. You're in a casual conversation, whether it's with family members or at work, and you often hear how hard things are and how expensive things are. And do you need to let that into your mind? Do you need to believe that? You don't need to believe that. And sometimes we don't really choose to believe that except by not choosing not to believe it. Is that clear? Not saying no to that in our own consciousness, not reminding ourselves that's not the truth about ourselves. Interesting thing about thought. I have a bottle of it. Think of this bottle, it happens to say vinegar. But it's just water. Think of this as you and your mind. And we have the ability to allow thought to flow from within to without. Bud, would you help me? It's always nice to have help. Yeah. This is good help too. But I'm going to ask you to refill my bottle, would you? Pour some of your thought into mine. Just pour away. Okay. Doesn't work so good when I'm thought coming from the center of you out into the world. The outer stuff, the unimportant stuff, can't get in. Thank you. We have within us this infinite reservoir of truth and thought and divine ideas. It's ours to use. Oh, you just saw me. I filled it up, right? From the outside. Because what? Well, if you think of this as forward or the right way to allow thought to come from within you out into the world, this is thinking backwards. Charles said we do that. We look out into the world and through our five senses, we take in all this information. And we decide from that information, the five senses, what is the meaning of life? What is my value? How good am I? Oh, that illness is not curable. We come up with all kinds of ideas by looking at the outer world, and we take it in, and that's handed off to the subconscious mind, and the mind says, oh, okay, that's what you want. Charles Fillmore said, the proper way, the true way to think is from within to the without, to open your mind to divine ideas, to think from the deep center of your being, not accepting everything you see, feel, taste, and touch, and hear as the reality of the universe, but as just cues to tell you where you are in time and space. And let the deep thoughts of God come through you out into the world. They come through divine mind and into your subconscious and up through the conscious mind and get expressed out in the world. That's forward thinking. That's what Charles calls, or would call, backward thinking. In a lot of ways, we backward think. We forget the presence of God. We forget that we have the ability to choose the thoughts we hold in mind. That the thoughts we hold in mind, we forget are formative. That they're shaping our world and our experience. And then we say, oh, how'd that happen? If you really look, there's probably a chain of things, of thought, words, concepts that you held in your mind. Yeah. The difference between you and this bottle of water is I had to refill it from the outside. But the reality of you is you have this infinite well of divine mind within you. And all of the contents of God mind are available to you. And you can allow to flow into and through you. Jesus referred to living water. And I just use water, so let's call it a well of living water. Infinite ideas. Ideas of guidance and direction. Ideas of infinite good that are available to you. Ideas of prosperity. They're our divine inheritance. Nobody really comes into this world with a silver spoon in their mouths. That would make for, I think, a difficult birth, don't you? But they come with, if I'm going to, oh, Lord forgive me, a golden goose in their minds, in consciousness. A connection to the source. Remember the story of the golden goose and laying all the golden eggs? Yeah. The thing you don't want to do is forget you've got that goose. The God mind has an outlet through you. And infinite ideas of prosperity and life and health and wholeness are available to you. But when we start taking in all this stuff from outside, we start to shut down those channels. We shut down that information, and we start drawing conclusions from what we see, from what other people tell us. I can't tell you how many times in this life people have lied to me. Oh, you can't do that. I love the famous words of my mother, and I've told you this several times. When she heard I was coming to ministerial school, she said, "How can you be a minister?" Well, there she was, lying to me, saying, "You can't do this." But I love doing this. And hey, Mom, I've been doing it for a while now. Both of us have been doing this for a while now, yeah. We've risen to that rank of what are called old timers, I think. 35 years, yeah, that's a start. Yeah. A lot of people have lied to us, saying, "Oh, there's no cure for what you have," or "You're not smart enough, to handle that job," or "You don't have enough skill. You're too old." We hear all of these things that come in from the outside. And if you're thinking backwards, you're too old. Okay, then you place that in your mind, and you leave it in your mind, and you believe it. And you feel like it. I remember one of those old Unity people. I knew her in her 80s, and I knew her in her 90s. And she said about the time she became 92, she started to think, "Oh, I'm old." And then she stopped driving, and her whole life changed. She didn't change first. She changed her thinking first and began all of a sudden to believe, "Oh, I'm old." I remember Charles Fillmore's words he said about his age. "My age is none of my business." That's a good reminder. You have the choice to take in stuff from outside or let God think its thoughts through you. One of the famous quotes of Jesus Christ is, "Seek ye first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be yours as well." Well, seeking his kingdom is seeking those divine ideas. And those ideas are always going to be life, health, wholeness, supply, peace, love, good. The nature of God is absolute good. So it has to be good. The stuff we get from thinking backwards, letting the world fill us up, fill our minds with stuff, all kinds of limitation, all kinds of lies about who and what we are, what we're worth. I'm kind of tired of thinking backwards. I think it's time to turn around and face the truth. We are good. We are God's beloved children, in whom God is well pleased. Meister Eckhart, that parish priest in Germany, I know the church wanted to strangle that guy. He said some outrageous things, such as, "We don't have to get God to love us. It is its nature. It already does, just as you are." Why? Because God is a purer eyes than to behold iniquity, the Bible says, which means your mistakes, God does not give them room in mind, does not see, only sees you as pure and perfect and whole, an absolute light of his presence. How many times Jesus said, "I of myself can do nothing. The Father within performs the works." And that follows what Charles Fillmore said. Allow thought to flow from God mind into and through your mind and out into the world as good, as positive, creative thought that changes the world. But first, it changes you, and it changes your life. Now, I gave you an affirmation in our opening statement. It's kind of long. And years ago, well, it's been 1970s, that beloved minister Frank Hansen introduced me to this affirmation. And understand it clearly. God is mind, the one and only mind. Each one of us a point of awareness within that mind. It says, therefore, the sum and the originating consciousness. God is all. We used to say, God is the universe and everything in it. That's the sum. Oh, and yes, Who do we say? What do we say created this? It came out of God mind, divine mind. And God said, let there be. And there was. That's the movement of thought into expression. Now, I am an expression of that consciousness. Understand that you are an expression of God mind. God mind is seeking to allow it to have its ideas flow into and through you. They're always available to you. Ideas of life and health and wholeness and peace and prosperity and absolute good. As long as we don't think backwards, allowing the stuff from outside to fill our thinking, our minds, and our hearts. Now, all of that consciousness is yours to use. And you use it if you let it flow through you, through your mind, into the world. In other words, you let divine thoughts fill your mind, thoughts of good, thoughts of prosperity, thoughts of health and wholeness, thoughts of peace, thoughts of life, and none of the opposites. None of the things that the five senses might tell you, or your neighbors tell you, or even, for heaven's sakes, your mother tell you. Hold to those truths, and you'll experience those truths. So, when I was given this affirmation a lot of years ago, I was instructed to carry this around and use it regularly, and that meant daily. And it was suggested maybe even a year. But that all of us in that class would be amazed at the changes that occurred. First in us, in the thoughts that we held in mind. We'd be amazed at the lack of the negativity that we allowed in our minds anymore. We'd be amazed at the changes in the conditions in our life experiences. I would accept that any day. Wouldn't you? Yeah. To make the right connections with the source and the universe. God has given us the protection to be able to think from within to the without. And when we do that, nothing else gets in. All the stuff that we don't want, and we don't want to experience, and we don't want to believe, can't get in. It's a pretty good win, don't you think?